Hey everyone, Brennan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to 5 favorite obscure rock albums. So the rock world is filled with tons of classic albums, but there's just as many, maybe even more, that flew under the radar and never scaled the heights of the classic albums. Certainly not for lack of quality of music anyway. So this episode is going to focus on 5 of my favorite obscure rock albums. And I think these should have been hits. You stick around and find out if you agree with me on that. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you're gonna stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with 5 favorite obscure rock albums. All right, so we're kicking things off here, no particular order. First one up, UK rockers Trapp's Hot Wire from 1974. This was their 4th studio album and first one without Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes, of course, would depart in 1973 and head off to Deep Purple. So they went from a trio at that point to a 4-piece band featuring the lineup with the 2 original guys, Mel Galley on guitar and lead vocals and Dave Holland on drums. They replaced Glenn Hughes on bass with Pete Wright and then added second guitar player Rob Kendrick. And so the music on this one here, while unfortunately it did not continue the success of the original band, for me it showed a lot of growth for them and has become definitely my favorite out of all of the Trapp's albums. This album has a mix of boogie and funk rock that makes the album groove from top to bottom. I think it also adds in a lot more hook-laden moments and songs than the first 3 albums do, helping make this one here really, really stand out in my opinion. Opening track on here, Backstreet Love, is definitely one you should check out. For me, it gives you everything you want from hard rock, funk and boogie music, strong, powerful vocals, a funky backbeat, some killer groove to this thing. The rest of the album follows suit. So if you dig that first track, you're definitely going to like the rest of this thing. So it's one of those albums, when I pop it on, I listen to it all the way through. I just don't think it has, any low points within it. Now, the band would go on to release 2 more albums, a self-titled one, Trapp's, 1975, and Hold On in 1979. But Hot Wire, the one we're talking about here, this one I think is their high point, and that's the one I'm focusing on here. All right, next up we got Michigan-based US rockers Brownsville and Air Special 1978. Band was formerly known as Brownsville Station. So you may recognize that, their 1973 hit Smokin' in the Boys Room, that would be covered 12 years later by Motley Crue in 1985. This album here is their 7th studio album if we count in the Brownsville Station records, which I am. This one here produced by Tom Werman, who produced also Cheap Trick, Blue Oyster Cult, and of course Motley Crue. Hence the connection between Smokin' in the Boys Room. I find the band to be comparable to both Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, that sort of classic 70s sounding rock and roll. Interestingly, bassist Michael Lutz would later join Ted Nugent's band and play on his album Spirit of the Wild in 1995. Unfortunately, Air Special turned out to be the final album from Brownsville or Brownsville Station, whichever way we're going with the name on that, which is a real shame because this one here is my absolute favorite out of their entire catalog. The album literally smokes, it's so hot. This one here, just a barn burner of an album. Every track on it is super good, tough, hard rock. When I think of that, this is the album that comes to mind. Check out the songs number 1, number 2, and number 9. Taste Your Love, Waiting for the Weekend, and Love Stalker. All of those songs are absolutely amazing. See if this album doesn't become a favorite for you too. All right, next one up. Of course, I had to fit this one in here. Anyone that's watched my channel knows I talk about this artist plenty, but of obscure albums, definitely had to fit him in. We're talking about saxophonist Bobby Keys, the self-titled release from 1972. This is a reissue out on Wounded Bird Records. What's interesting is that for a long time, that was his debut and only album until just recently. They released an unreleased second album that just came out here this past December of 2023. And so that was very cool to now have a second album from Bobby Keys. This one here, Bobby is an or is or was, depending upon how you want to look at it, but an in-demand session player playing with the Rolling Stones, John Lennon, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Leonard Skinner, just to name a few. He appears on so many great albums, and at the time, I didn't really know that, but as soon as I heard this, it was reminiscent of all those great albums, making it really stand out for me, and absolutely fantastic that this guy had made a solo album when he did. And the guest people that are on this album, the one we're talking about, his self-titled album, features George Harrison, Ringo Starr, both of the Beatles. We got Dave Mason in there, Leslie West of Mountain, Nicky Hopkins, Jack Bruce from Cream. 15 total guests and all appear on this album. It's basically he called up all his friends and they came out and supported him to play on this album. And I'm so glad they did. The amount of energy from all these different amazing musicians really comes through on this here. He does the lead work and the saxophone, but all those other great musicians that support him to create the music on here has made this album become what I would refer to as a pick-me-up record. Whenever I can't find something to listen to, I don't know what I want, I could pop this one on and as always just fits the mood that I'm in. It's one of those kind of albums that's good no matter when I pop it on. Next up, melodic hard rock band Trillion and their self-titled release from 1978, debut album from the Chicago-based band produced by Gary Lyons, who worked with Foreigner and Gamma. The pop rock on here is similar in style to Styx in Kansas. If you're fans of those bands, you're going to really like this here. The band features Dennis Fredrickson on vocals, better known as Fergie Fredrickson, who would sing with Toto and lay rock. Also, the band features Patrick Leonard on keyboards, who would be a fairly well-known songwriter and producer for bands like Bon Jovi, Roger Waters, and even Madonna. So you got two actual well-known people in this lineup here, helping to bring some clout to it. Of course, at the time, people didn't know who they were, but sort of a retrospective thing, this album should get a lot more love simply because of that. The album itself is full of melodic songs with stunning arrangements, tricky instrumentation on it, making for some really interesting music and memorable rock and roll that's out there. Despite it being highly underrated band, these guys are amazing and definitely deserve some more attention. And it is a wonder, I should say, that they ran under the radar as they did with how amazing the music is that's on here. The first three songs sound like classic songs that could appear on any other album by famous bands that are out there. They could be on Styx albums. The song Hold Out, Big Boy, and Give Me Your Money, Honey. Again, if you like Styx, check this out. I know I keep referencing that band on here, but it's just that sort of big, bombastic pop rock that's over the top sort of sound. These guys do it amazingly. And they would release a second album, Clear Approach, in 1980, but unfortunately, all of the stunning arrangements and tricky instrumentation, I think, were pared back on it. I just don't hear that same level of stuff on that album. And so, of course, they weren't able to gain the commercial ground that they think they were trying to by stripping all of that away. So it's not unsurprisingly that it didn't happen. I think if they had stuck with the sound that's on this debut album, they really could have risen to something in the very early 80s. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And just another amazing classic sounding album that ran under the radar. Okay, and the final one to talk about here is supergroup Whitford St Holmes from 1981, debut album from the duo that features Brad Whitford on guitar, coming from Aerosmith, and Derek St Holmes on guitar and vocals from Ted Nugent and his own band St Paradise. Now, Brad Whitford, having left Aerosmith in 1981, he formed a band with Derek. The album is sort of the best of both worlds. It takes all the amazing guitar work of Aerosmith with a mix of the soulful vocals from Ted Nugent's band, and in my opinion, Derek St. Holmes is the best vocalist that Ted Nugent ever had in his lineup. That was probably released just a bit too late to capitalize on that classic 70s rock sound that this album really has. Being that it was 1981 when it came out. If the album had been released a few years earlier, 78, 79, maybe even 1980. I think this one really could have done something. The album itself, I think, is just filled with killer tracks. It has them in spades. The pair really do it upright on here. Tracks 2, 3, 4 are my favorite. Whiskey Woman, Hold On, which is the absolute most stellar song. Definitely check that one out, track 3. And then track 4, Sharpshooter, which was the one that was released as a single at the time. The band would not be able to build on any of this at the time. Unfortunately, they disbanded. Brad would briefly join the Joe Perry project before both Joe Perry and Brad would rejoin Aerosmith. I always wished Brad had recorded with the Joe Perry project. That would have been simply amazing as well. Now, Brad and Derek did reunite and record one more album simply called Reunion that came out in 2015. But unfortunately, I think the magic was gone. It's just nowhere near as good as this debut album is. So there you go. 5 favorite obscure rock albums. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully, maybe you found something you hadn't heard of within that. You can go check those out. And of course, if you did know about these albums, let me know your thoughts. Maybe you too think they're also, favorite obscure rock albums as well. And also just let me know, what is your favorite obscure rock album? Which one would you throw into the mix here? All right, everyone, take care. Have a good one. And I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.